What button?
The city PD has to have time to
Yeah, that's why I said that. So. Okay, we ready? Okay. I'd like to start the Architectural Board of Review meeting for June 11th, starting with public comment. Is anybody in the audience that would like to speak on an item not on today's agenda? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to approval of the ABR minutes for 2 meetings. The first one being May 14th. Can I have a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
Motion by Keith, seconded by Gary. This would be May 14th. Does anybody have any comments to anything up to and including item number 1?
Madam Mayor. Nice.
Oh, classic.
Maybe one day. Number 7.
Number 7 of item number 1.
Item number 1, I believe that might be reversed. Return to consent if electric pole is to remain as proposed location. Return to full board if electric pole is moved further from the railing.
We wanted the pole to be at least an arm's length away from the railing.
That was
That was the intent.
That was said in number 1.
Oh.
So return to consent if the electrical pole is to be moved further from the railing, and otherwise full board if it's going to be remain in its proposed location.
Does that?
I kind of think that that's what we said. Does anybody else remember that? Anybody?
I'm not quite understanding. Do we want, if it gets further away, like if from the railing, isn't that a positive move?
It seems like it's it was reversed also. So you might go back and listen to that, but I think I think Gary's right.
How about return to full board if the electric pole is to remain in the proposed location? Return to consent if the electric pole is to be moved further away.
That sounds right to me. Just check the audio or video. Anything else on item number 1? Item 2? Item 3? Oh, I don't even have this on. You didn't say anything. Nothing on item 3. Item 4? All right. All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? None? Motion carries. Okay, then approval of the minutes from May 29th. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion made by Keith.
Second.
Seconded by Chris. Anything up to and including item number 1? Oh, we did them backwards, didn't we? Sorry about that. Item 2. Item 3. Item 4. Item 5. All right. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, abstentions, motion carries. Consent calendar for June 4th. Can I have a motion to ratify those?
I'll make that motion.
Motion made by Paul, seconded by Keith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Consent last week, June 4th, we had item A, 1924 Cliff Drive. Got a project design approval and final approval as submitted. Item B, 322 and 320 West Canon Perdido Street. Got a final approval, project design approval and final with conditions. Item C, 628 West Mitchell Terrena Street was continued 1 week. Item D, 122 Santa Barbara Street. Got a project design approval and final approval as noted. And consent last week was reviewed by Keith Rivera and Chris Gilliland.
Did you say E was included in that too?
You missed E on that.
Is there an E?
Okay. Oh, sorry about that. Yes, item E, 2015 Red Rose Way. Project design approval and continued indefinitely for a landscape plan.
Okay. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. All right. Consent calendar for June 11th. Can I have a motion to ratify those? Motion made by Chris, seconded by Paul.
Okay, consent calendar today, June 11th, we had item A, 628 West Mitchell Terrena, got project design approval and final approval with conditions. Item B, 1812 and 1814 or 1816 San Pascal Street, got a final approval with conditions. Item C, 1018 East Gutierrez, got a project design approval and final approval with color as noted. Item D, 500 Block West Anapamu, got final approval with conditions. And consent today was reviewed by Chris Gilliland and Keith Rivera.
All right. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. All right. Announcements. Tony, any announcements on your end?
Yes, Kirk Radine will be absent today.
Okay.
And Dawn Sherry, you said you would be leaving at 4:45 today, which may or
If we're
may
not
not
done
be
before
before the
then.
end of the meeting. And Paul Zink will be absent from the next meeting on June 25th. That's all I have for announcements.
Anybody else have any announcements? Nope. All right. Subcommittee reports, any? Okay. Moving on to item 1, 822 East Canon Perdido. This is final approval. And do we have minutes? Okay. This project got project design approval on March 5th with 6 comments. Do you want to just go through those comments as you go through, or do you want me to read them first? Do you,
Could read them.
I'll just read them really.
Right one. Came back with a change in the plaster, deciding the plaster. 2 weeks ago.
Oh, I just don't have the minutes here. Those are the minutes we just reviewed. Okay. So there's actually 9 comments, so I'm not going to read them all. I'm just going to have you go through them. That'll make it easier. Quicker, probably. So your name for the record?
Very good, Madam Chair. Edward DeVicente with DMA Architecture.
And Courtney Miller with the Office of Katie O'Reilly Rogers.
Very good, Madam Chair and fellow board members. We're here. We've been before, I think this is our 5th time on this project, Habitat for Humanity on 822 East Cannon, Perdido. It's 12 new low-income homes, and we're excited to the pace we've been moving, and the team's been working really hard. And initially, this project was to show that we can do green for low income. So we've got a lot of engineering that's happened and some value engineering over the last couple of months, and the project's targeting at about 60% better than Title 24 currently. So we're excited as we'll be wrapping that up in the next couple of weeks and getting into the building department. And we want to thank the board for all of the input along the way as well to help kind of refine the project, and you'll see some of those based on the comments from last week. So with that, we've got in front of you a mostly complete set. I left out some of the engineering that wasn't relevant to some of the ABR concerns. And we've got a detail book, 11 by 17 with the cover, and then some individual building by building materials boards. And then our color board, we have just one color board for all of the different buildings here, and they're tagged in the sets. So those are the pieces that you have in front of you here. So since we were last here, just want to generally go over some of the things before I get into the list, and we can look at some of those items that changed in more detail. We've got the full detail book now for your review, picking up a lot of the comments and coordinating those elements. So we've also, the major things we've done is we've redesigned Unit 12, which is on the Cannon Perdido front. I've mentioned the final materials boards and some minor detail refinements throughout. We looked at some of the openings where we had a kind of final opportunity to realign where the rooms allowed. And for example, Unit 1 here got a realignment of a window that was upstairs with the window below. Some minor things like that. Trims and awnings were studied as we were requested to do. And we added a mailbox too to Unit 12 for the project. So more specifically to the comments that we heard last time, let me pull my notes here. Go ahead and read the item first. Last time we came for an in-progress review, really looking at the change. We incorporated quite a bit of stucco into the project, where before it was just fiber cement siding. And so the comment number 1 was generally there was support for the use of stucco siding to study the detailing to be more consistent with the different cladding materials. And so I'm going to bundle that with number 8 as well, which is to study the sizes and proportions of the wood members to be consistent with the architectural style, because they really go together. And so we've taken a closer look at some of the different items where this detailing kind of just needed some closer look when we made that material change. And so we've taken a look at corner trims. We've removed them at some locations, such as on Unit 2. We've also taken a look at some of the banding on sheet 202, which is also one of the other comments. Some of the banding related to primarily Unit 2 here on this form. We've eliminated the banding on this is Unit 5 here, and Units 3 and 4 with their green color. It's kind of grounds it as it's more horizontal. By removing it, with a stronger vertical, it helped ground the building. I see a little typo here on the previous sheet where the ghost of our banding remained, but it is indeed intended to go away. So other things that we looked at was alignment at the corners of the gutters and the downspouts with some of the trim elements as well as the corbels. So you'll see throughout that we've taken and beefed up some of the corbel elements and aligned them with some of the trims on the corners where there's trim, and sometimes there's without, as there is in Unit 2 here. And so we can take a look at that more closely, just kind of starting from Unit 202. So here on Unit 12, is with a bit of a redesign of the facade, which I'll come back to, we've got some stronger corner trims aligned with the corbels We've removed the trims on Unit 2, and so they are more independent. And also on elevation 2, you can see on our third story unit here, on Unit 3, again, that corner, which was, we felt it was really important to keep those as the stucco, because it was getting, when we looked at it in perspective, turning the corner without that was getting too monolithic. So we wanted to have those vertical breakups, and it also carries through to the rear yards and also to the driveway as well, and it helps just break up this 3-story building here much better. So you'll see that general realignment with the trims and the corbels kind of throughout. Additionally, the entry covers, primarily in the driveway on A202 and A203. Here on the white elevation, this is Unit 8, we took a closer look at the detailing of this canopy here. We added some corbels to it, moved it up slightly, and increased the size of some of the members. You'll see it more. You'll see the changes more pronounced on Units 3 and 4 of Building B on A203. Some of the other detailing which got refined is the window shading as well. We looked at the alignment of those with the heads, upsized the corbels slightly, and extended them out horizontally so they gave us a little bit of coverage. This is something that we can see in the blown up elevations in the 400 series and also the details. And the other item which we were asked to take a closer look at was the windows themselves. So we've gone ahead and added the sill piece back in and the sill apron, and we've left that trim detail consistent at all of the elevation, all the window openings, whether they be siding or stucco. That's remained consistent throughout. We didn't see the need to really do something more different at those locations. At the other material locations, we thought this was working pretty well here at these locations. Next item was, it was felt that where two materials were used on the same building, changing the colors, a change of color should occur. So we really just ended up at one location where this remained, which is on sheet A202, and it's Unit 11. Unit 11 here. So this is we have a darker gray stucco over a lighter gray with the siding up above. And all other unit locations, the material is consistent from the ground floor all the way up to the roof. So this comment was now just to this Unit 11. Number 4, there was no support for plaster horizontal bands. All the banding, as you'll see in the detail, is wood or a fiber cement type resembling wood, so that's what we have in the detail books. Study the layout of detectable pavers and alignments with adjacent conditions. We'll come back to this with the hardscape and landscape review. Number 6, study of wood trim around the windows is encouraged. Consider the details for consistency. I've covered that, and you can see that in the detail book as well. And number 8 we've covered. So number 9 gets into options for introducing landscaping at rear fencing and preliminary landscape plans. So before I get to that, well, I think I've covered it generally, so I'll leave it for the board to questions on some of the details and some of the larger views in the 400 series if you want to look at that more closely. So with that, I'll leave it to Courtney to take us through some of the landscape. But let me touch on, again, the materials for the detectable warning, going back to the comment. Number 5. And so we've taken another look at this, and it's something that we're not entirely thrilled about either, with the requirement of the detectable warnings for the accessible path of travel. Here on L1, we're taking a look at it here. And we took another look at the code language, and the code is we're just really constrained. It says the detectable warnings alongside vehicular way must be 3 feet. or 36 inches is really what it says. And then the building department has required us to turn those in just before the garages and after the garages, or groups of garages. And so we're just really constrained to that requirement that they put on us. We looked at making the entire path at 48 inches, but it's just not meeting the letter of that code section. And so in the interest of moving the project through, this is something that we still do want to have conversations with the building department about. We've already had lengthy discussions about the requirement for these, but we're still looking for some creative solutions that we'd be happy to bring back to the board for review after final if we can find some wiggle room with these requirements. It's not ideal for us as designers either. So with that, we do have samples of those, which Courtney will present. Sure. And then we'll look at the rest of the landscape hardscape.
So this is an Ackerstone product.
The whole path?
Yeah, 3 feet wide. This is something that our office prefers to use instead of the yellow plastic that you see everywhere.
You can't walk on that stuff.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that's code. So,
I thought the detectable warning, this is a question actually. I'll let you finish.
so basically, it just has to be contrasting color to whatever the adjacent papers are. So this is exceptionally dark, but we would do something similar, maybe towards the brown range, depending on what paper colors we use. So in our eyes, this is considerably better than the plastic, but and certainly the yellow, but is what it is. So,
is there anything else for your presentation? Don't you have a landscaping? Yeah.
along the back.
Okay. So where are we? So the last time we presented, you saw a preliminary plan. So what we've done is just taken it to the next level, and not much has changed. We've just kind of tightened up everything. If you look at the streetscape, we're still using the Lagerstromia natchez as the street tree with the white flower, just with a low ground cover. Demondia with the Phormium jacksprat kind of interspersed throughout. We still have the rain gardens in front of a few of the units, and we're just planning on doing a simple carex in those with Dianella around the edges as an accent. There's a number of existing shrubs that we're attempting to reuse from the existing site. There is a few acanthus that are in really good shape, and that's Bear's Breach. There are a couple of camellias that we're going to be reusing, and a Cecile Brunner rose, and then also a wisteria vine, which is looking really great. And then an orange tree, a small orange tree and a small tangerine tree, which we have here and here. And those are, the main changes in the existing plant material from the previous plan that we're reusing. And then basically in the backyards, what we're trying to do is include a small tree in as many of them as possible without making it too dense. And most of them have a small planting area, and we're just using bulletproof shrubs and accents where appropriate. We have vines on each of the rear fences, so as you exit out the back onto the patio, you're not looking directly into a wood fence. And let's see, through the alley we have mostly succulents, the yellow Brugmansia and Agonis flexuosa, the dark purple one, I forget the name. So what we're going for is just a lot of color, low maintenance, low water, but something that's really just going to pop and go well with the architecture. So the other main comment since the last meeting, I think, was regarding this corner here and the slope. So what we did is I included a Brugmansia here as, kind of to catch your eye with the yellow flower color. We also have some Phormium, the dark bronzy burgundy one, and vines along this fence. The vines are the Hardenbergia. It's like a light purple color. And then we have a blow up of this whole slope area here on the bottom corner of the plan. So what's happening is we're going to be filling up to the dash line, and anything below that is being removed that's existing. And it's mostly pittosporum. It's not anything that's really that great looking. And then we're just filling in with pretty bulletproof stuff that can just withstand, minimal maintenance. We have some rafts and a few formium on the corner where you can kind of see through the fence. We're still proposing a 42-inch high wrought iron fence along this whole corner. And then on the lower part, we have Lonicera vines with the yellow flower. So, kind of just grouping some more showy stuff on the corner so you're not looking at ugly slope and and just maintenance friendly plant material everywhere else. And then I think that's pretty much it. We haven't made any other changes to the plans. The pavers and the layout have stayed the same. We now have irrigation included in the set. And I have a couple of the pavers that we have on the plans for you. So for now, this is what we were thinking, just a typical Ackerstone antique cobble, which we use very often on our projects. And so the color mix, it's kind of a brown, dark brown and tan color.
All right.
That's it.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Do we have anybody in the audience that would like to speak on this project? No? All right. Questions from the board? Chris, do you have any questions? Gary?
Yeah, I do have some questions about the trellis that you're proposing over the windows. Where did that occur? Now I see it. It's occurring here.
There's a shadow line on all of them.
And then the other question I had was on the banding on the plaster. You said you removed some of it, but some of it's going to remain. I see it now. So your third story element is your plan is that it's going to remain there.
That's correct. On the one you're looking at on A202, the little gray portion, that's a little typo, if you will.
If you're on A202, turn to it here.
You can see it better on A203.
But you still have,
than-
his question is, you still have banding on the plaster,
Correct. This
even
help-
though it wasn't supported in the last meeting.
Well, the banding it's not a plaster band. That was what we understood wasn't supported. It was plaster trim pieces.
But it's also it's just a flat band. It's not. It's
It's
not like
wood.
It's a
wood
flat
horizontal.
2x8 piece of wood. Is that correct? As opposed to the other ones have details to them, right?
There's a couple of different bands. Most of them are flat in the rear units. On unit 2, there's a more decorative band because it's at the street and it has some refinement detail, which also matches the other white building or unit here, unit 8 as well. It's got a little more refinement in the trim, and that shows up.
Why don't you show
in
us
detail.
those details?
Sure.
Are they in this package? Yeah.
I think it's here. 2122. Yeah, my question would be on the banding is that you have, I think, 3 or 4 different details on that. And where those different details occur at.
Very good. So 2121 and 2122 are our trims there. And
They're not twins, but
Trim.
twins. I thought I heard. See,
2123
Jackhammering
and
again.
as well. And it's going to be 2120. There's four. They're duplicated where there's siding or stucco.
So 2122
2120.
is this one.
Correct. 2122 is the green building.
Where's 2121?
2121 is
Is that one?
the two white buildings. Here
Because
with
it's
a little
wood.
more trim,
It's shiplap or
which
Hardy.
carries to the front unit here, unit 2. So where the same materials are being used, the color, we carried that same trim piece.
And then 2123. It's also wood.
2123 is wood with the siding above and the stucco below. That's unit 11.
Okay.
But again, the more simple band.
But, and this is still Gary's question, so I'm just piggybacking onto here. This is that 2122 detail, but this is not the same detail. And this is wood and wood with the trim in between, and so is this, but you have different details.
Yeah, so with the siding here. Okay, yes, so there is one that doesn't show the same finished siding below. So 2123 is similar to on the wood band. So it's really just the siding moving down through. And so what we did is, again, we're kind of grouping the trims with the colors of the buildings. So the green stucco and the green siding is getting the more plain band, and the more decorative is the white building, or white unit 2 and unit 8 as well. But for those are the only two with the more decorative trim. All the other bands are the more simple wood trim.
Okay. And one other question. We asked you about increasing the size of the corbels or the brackets. What did you increase that size from, and did you?
We did, and you'll see it in the detail book. The corbels were before 4x8s material, and now I believe they're 6x8s. I didn't recall that in my detail book, but I believe they're 6x8s is what we're showing.
Okay.
Let you know which detail that is.
All right. Those are my only questions.
Thanks, Gary. Paul? Keith?
On the horizontal siding where you removed the corner trim, what's going to be the detail there?
This was a detail we saw around town that we liked, where we just want to miter the corner. We'd like to just miter the corners together. It's a little more elegant. Again,
This is fiber cement, right?
yes.
Okay. Also, maybe you can, I'm missing them, but it looks like your typical roofing details. Can you point those out? Like, I don't know, the index seems to indicate some details, your typical kind of ridge, rakes, eaves, that kind of stuff. I'm not finding them.
The rake is 3004.
Okay, I don't have a 3,000. Let's see. Okay. All right.
And also the eave is 3002.
How about the ridge?
The ridge we haven't detailed. It's just going to be a standard asphalt ridge. We're not ventilating. It's a conditioned attic space.
Okay. And then is the solar part of the initial?
Yes, the solar is. The way we get to that Title 24 is with solar thermal. It's an integrated hybrid system with solar thermal panels as well as PV. And
Do we have the details for the solar panel installation?
At this point, we don't. No, it's a standard module, but we can bring the details in certainly.
Okay, thanks. No more questions.
Thanks, Keith. Stephanie?
Landscape questions. I'm trying to. You have a lot of paving transition, different situations, and I guess I'm trying to figure out what this material is. If it's the curb, or
That-
is that
Which material, Stephanie, on the camera
This
here?
is this band around the. It's kind of shown as a curb, but
This
it's
one?
not
The double
really called out
line.
as material. There's this, and is that what that is?
Actually, no. It's intended to be a soldier course row of pavers.
Okay.
It's just we didn't actually draft in each paver.
No, it's okay.
So-
I just want to.
And it's intended to be flush. So where we have planters, what we'd like to do is instead of having a traditional concrete curb, it'll be pavers.
Okay.
So
So it's more like this detail than this
yes,
detail?
yes, this is what it would. Well, actually,
Would
this.
and where would this detail?
That.
Where's this one?
We may not have that. It just may be our standard. I don't believe we have a concrete curb.
Okay.
Oh, well. No. No, I don't think that we do.
So
that
you're-
one would
You're not
be-
using this detail anywhere.
No.
Okay. That was my question.
Is that it, Stephanie?
Pardon me?
Is that it? Questions?
Yeah, because I haven't had time to look at these.
Okay. I had a couple. There were the shed entries. Architectural is this way? Which way? Then just go to the elevations. I think there were a couple of individual shed entries that. There's one here, and these, and I think there's some on the back. There's one other. Oh, here we go. On all these, do they have? How are they supported? Because I saw the detail in the detail book, but it didn't seem to. Can you show me that detail?
Mm-hmm. Following the references.
Just the detail on the. It's probably in your detail book. I was
Yeah.
thinking.
But here it is. It's 2902.
2902. So, okay. It's just coming out. There's no corbel or anything. It's just a drywall.
Yeah, very simple soffit. These are at the rear. They're rear covers at the rear yards, and so we wanted to minimize that detail.
So let me go back to the elevations over here. So these are all the rear. Sorry, keep going back. Okay. Then I had a question. It was about the detectable warnings. I thought that the detectable warning was supposed to alert you to a hazard and not be the entire, not be the hazard. Because you can't walk on these things. And where's that hardscape plan?
It's on L1.
You were the one that did all the research. It was my understanding that you needed detectable warnings when you were entering a hazard, such as traffic, but that it wasn't supposed to be the entire walking surface.
This
But I could be wrong. I'm just asking you.
Yeah, this is, how far do I go back? The Our Lady Guadalupe Church actually has the same flush condition, and you can see the installation all the way around the sidewalk area where they had this, the detectable warnings were installed. So the requirement in the code is that when it's adjacent to a vehicular way and you don't have a curb or some other method, bollards or et cetera, to separate those, then you have to put the detectable warnings along the entire way of that adjacency.
The entire 36 inches.
Yes.
Okay, and the only reason I'm asking is because I just recently had a project, and it was very similar. It was a pathway running along an alley, and it was very specific. The building department was very specific that the detectable warnings were not supposed to be on the entire pathway.
Was it
So-
was it flush, the paving?
So I guess then that leads into my next question is why couldn't you do a level change so you wouldn't have to make the entire pathway completely inaccessible because nobody's going to use it. They're going to deliberately go out here to walk. So is there some reason why you couldn't have done a level change there so that you would have eliminated the need to do that?
Yes and no. It's complicated in that the maneuvering here is pretty tight for transportation standards. So we had to look at every opening of the garages and garage widths and stuff. So that was pretty tight. Now, one of the things, because it's accessible, where you have your typical up-down condition, if this was a 6-inch curb or a 4-inch curb or any size curb, you would have to transition down at each driveway and then back up so the vehicles could go through. And so it wasn't feasible. Now, we did have a discussion with transportation that what if we just do a rolled 2-inch curb along this edge? And that was something that we'd proposed, and transportation wasn't willing to go there at the time. So that's one of the arguments that we can go back with, because the building department seemed to be open to that as an approach and eliminate the detectable warnings. But the other thing that's occurred is in March, the ADA standards were updated, and detectable warnings are no longer required, except at transit stops and also intersections. So, but the California Building Code hasn't caught up quite yet. So we're at this place where it's not ideal. We think we have a good argument, and that's why we want to come back and, again, through the plan check process, again, check with the building department and transportation and see if they'd be open to something besides it. It's our primary goal is to come up with a solution that does away with it.
And this is all because you couldn't have put the ADA accessible unit in the front. It had to be in the back.
That's not correct. Because we have a common area here, where the accessible units ended up didn't really matter. You have to have, if you have a common area, that has to have an accessible path all the way from the right-of-way. So it was kind of a double whammy.
All right. This is a question about the landscaping. Where's that planting plan?
L4.
Which one?
L4.
L4. I see a honeysuckle vine on one of the gabled entryways, which one again? One of these I saw.
There's one on every.
I didn't see one on every one. I just wanted to make sure that we had vines growing up on every.
Yes, we have one on. They're a little difficult to see.
Where are they called out? I'm not seeing them called out.
This one is here.
The Ella.
This one is here.
Okay, that's the honeysuckle.
This one is here. That calls out.
Okay, I
two.
see that.
So there's one here also.
Okay,
Here.
good.
Here.
And then here, what about along the?
We've got them literally on.
Where is that? That's. Wait. That's calling out this pan.
We have Pandaria on the
the
north-facing
bound.
garages.
Okay, got that. Didn't have a lot of time to read the landscape plan, so perfect. Okay, thanks. Comments? Or did you have any more questions, Stephanie? No. Do you want to? Are you ready to make comments? No. Keith?
Sure. I think you really need to rethink the corner trim on the horizontal siding, especially with the fiber cement. And somehow So I think you need to rethink that. We need to see the solar panel detailing, how those are installed. Also, I'm not getting the feeling that the detailing's there quite yet. There's a lot of dimensioning that's yet to be shown on a lot of the banding, for example, or things that you're calling out as custom trims, and a lot of vertical dimensions like on some of the posts and railings and that. I think overall the elevation moves you've made and everything are, worked with our comments. But again, I think the detailing needs a little more development.
Is that it? Are you ready yet, Stephanie? Or do you want me to come back to you at the end? Oh. Gary?
Keith, the detail does need some more development, and some of the things that I see that needs more development is on the corbelling that you have. I feel like you need to finish the ends a little bit more than a square cut, and I feel like the details that you have, if you are going to stick with the banding. If you are going to stick with the banding and you want to put banding on the plaster, it needs to have a purpose other than just to separate the buildings. So if you are going to do it, it should have a detail like it is a water table, or it has some sort of purpose other than looking like a plant-on 2x8 or something. So
More like that.
this is quite a bit of a detail, but it still has to have some type of a detail like that, so it has a purpose. And when we see these ones that are on plaster like that are just dividing the plaster and they're square and flush, they don't look natural at all. So I would say that detail is not really very acceptable. There was another detail that I was looking at. Was this detail right here, where you have the 4x4s and a 2x4 on the flat brace that comes up on this. I think this is a kind of an unnatural brace on it too, and I think that some detailing should be worked out on that. And I believe this is the same detail as this, or did you have that detail in the book? No, that's not the mailboxes, is it?
We do have that detail.
Okay. Well, anyways, I'm with Keith that we do need some more details, and I'm glad Keith brought up the solar too, because we've had some issues about the height of how high the solar sits on top of the roof, and that's why he was asking for that detail. So just some minor details that we should probably get. Even the window details, which I think are actually pretty darn good, given the number of details that you have on this building, which you don't have a lot. They're pretty simple buildings. I think that some of the fenestration details should, for instance, I feel like the header should be just a little bit more proud than the stiles or something like that. You've got 2x4s as stiles and then a 2x6 as the header, which are pretty common denomination timbers, and it's not really supposed to be a timber framed window fenestration. It's supposed to have some sort of detail. So given that you're looking at a Craftsman style, you should have that on the windows. The header should be proud to the stiles or something like that to give it some sort of dimensional change to make it look like it's not a timber framed window fenestration. One more over. Yeah, and you use the same details on the plaster as you did for the. You use the same. This is still a door detail. Door. There we are. So on the window, on the plaster details, they come out real nice because of the because of the dimension of the plaster, and you're using the 2x4. But then when we use the hardy siding, they don't come out as nice because of the way that the 2x6 sits out on the edge. So, and the dimension here, you can see that this absorbs some of that dimension and gives you the proudness, where this doesn't absorb that dimension. So just your choice of materialities, maybe you should look into that, getting different thicknesses. Just my opinion.
Thanks, Gary. Paul? Oh, you didn't want to make any comments at all? I was kind of coming back to you. Okay. Chris? Didn't get that at first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have much to add. The landscape seems to be all in order, aside from the detectable paving debacle. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me, so hopefully we can come to a resolution and eliminate that or cut down on that somehow, because, thinking about, like Don said, somebody's not going to want to walk on that, and I can't imagine going that length on a wheelchair either. It'd be a bumpy ride, so.
Be a disaster.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Stephanie?
Yeah, I guess I'm concurring with a lot of comments that have been made about the window detailing. I appreciate you guys adding back in the apron sills.
Turn your mic on.
But the one sill detail that I see in here doesn't have any dimensions on the sill, and I think that the members could be a little heavier. Also, an elevation detail of the trim around the windows, showing if everything's flush, or is the header coming out a little bit, farther than the jamb casing or trim, and things like that. I'm a little concerned with your calling for gypsum on the underside of your soffits. Would that be? Is that what you intended?
Or a fiber cement
Okay.
paneling as well.
Oak fiber cement.
Could also work, probably better.
Okay. That's it.
Yeah, I think everybody's kind of thinking the same thing. And for me, I don't know what happened. I feel like the project changed from the project design approval to now in not such a great way. And maybe it was when you went to the different materials. I don't know what happened, but I was much more happy with this project when it got project design approval. And maybe when you started introducing the stucco, just the whole thing broke down for me. And that's where the detailing is kind of muddy for me, like how everything works, because it's a lot more difficult to make wood trim work with stucco and make it look good. And so I think that's where I'm struggling. I'm looking at even this elevation here, and the appearance of that in wood, horizontal wood siding, as opposed to stucco with a horizontal band, to me just changes everything. And it makes or breaks this project for me, because I can visualize a 3-story building with horizontal wood siding because of the nature of the horizontal wood siding being so traditional. And then going to stucco, I think that it makes your job a lot more difficult. It's not as simple as just removing the wood siding and changing it to stucco, because the whole building style changes. I don't know if anybody else feels the same way. It's just that's where I think that if you feel like we're giving you a hard time, I think that's where it's coming from. And I know you spend a lot of time value engineering and you're trying to make it work. And in some ways, it's ending up costing a lot more money it might end up costing way more money to do the stucco because of the detailing that you're going to have to do for it. I'm not seeing it working yet. I still don't. I've made this comment last time that I think that this elevation on the east side of the property is much more successful than the west. I'm still struggling with this 2-story and this band and the fact that this whole side of this west structure is kind of not very street friendly. Another one of my comments last time was to look at different ways other than banding to break up the 3-story massing. So you've got this 3-story building, and so it's made it a lot more difficult for you to make the mass, bulk, and scale work, because you're trying to use just standard windows, and you're not punching windows out and putting a lot of things on, putting a lot of three-dimensionality on the elevations. So that's where I see it not working yet. I agree with all the other comments on some of the choices of sizes and some of the sizes not showing, and then how you've detailed the underneath side of awnings and overhangs, or how you've not even detailed it. Well, here you've got T&G. That's good. So I agree. I think that's where the project needs to be developed a little bit more before we can give it final approval. And I have a really big problem with the detectable warnings. So I think that also has to really be resolved before we give this final approval. So that's about it for me. Yeah, go ahead.
I want to commend Dawn for saying what she said, because it's what's in my heart. And I don't want to say anything bad about the project, because I believe in the concept of the project, but it's looking like the projects now. It's lost a lot of its cute architectural charm and character. And when you say that you're now 60% better than Title 24 as something positive, you lost some of the architecture during the value engineering process. And that's the role of this board, is to make sure that the project, the building, belongs in our community. So thank you, Dawn, for saying those things.
Yeah, and I'm sympathetic to your problem. It's not an easy position to be in, but it's just not quite working yet. So I know you'll be able to make it work. So I have some notes to fabricate a motion, but does somebody want to fabricate a motion?
I'll take a stab at it. So ask the applicant, would 2 weeks be enough time? Or okay. So this would be a 2-week continuance back to full board with the following comments. Overall, the board feels that the detailing still needs development for consistency with the materials and architectural style. Specifically, board needs to see the details for the solar installations. Board questions the corner detailing of the horizontal siding, encourages the applicant to look at a corner trim there. Other specific details include the trellis, window trellises, diagonal members, lack of dimensions on detailing at trims, flashings, and railings. Consider additional articulation at the ends of corbel members, and introducing more articulation or rethinking the horizontal bands at the plaster buildings. Board would like to see elevation details of window trims to indicate extensions, change in depths, etc. That's all I have.
You got the detectable warnings in there, too.
I'm not worked up about detectable warnings. I think that's a code issue. We'll let the architect figure it out with the building department. I mean, that's a building and safety issue. And
Okay.
it's, in my mind, it's no more than that.
Second for the motion? Seconded by Gary. Under discussion?
Under discussion, can we add a comment about Unit 12 in the front porch? This is the one that we've been working on back and forth. This element, or at least is the board satisfied with this direction? We want to see another iteration.
We're okay with that part. I'm not okay with that part.
Architect to continue resolving the elevation of Building 12 that faces Canon Pradillo. The board is still struggling with the forms, or still has some concerns with the form.
Okay. Any more discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. Sorry, Edward. But I know it'll look great. We know it'll look great. Okay, we're behind a little bit, quite a little bit. So we're on to item number 2, 901 Olive Street. Is there any more coffee? All right. Your name for the record.
Mark Kirkard, Principal of Design Arc Architects.
Melissa Tienerly from Design Arc.
Philip Suding, Suding Design Landscape Architects.
Go ahead, Mark.
Okay. So I hope everyone will be happy that we removed all of the perforated corrugated metal from the project. No corrugated metal whatsoever on the project, to tell you the truth. What we can focus on is the corner where we had kind of most of the corrugated metal in question. I'm going to go to the bigger views. Here we go. So what we've done here that shows a little bit on this perspective, but shows better on the backside, is that we've basically replaced this perforated corrugated metal with a horizontal trellage that will in more or less the same place as it was before, but it's horizontal slats. And then we're going to be training trumpet vine up onto that, and some of it will actually trail up onto this upper portion. So it's basically, we came away from it and the team had kind of considered some way of getting more of a green screen, which I think had popped up in different conversations here. However, the traditional green screen that we're familiar with, at least by that name, is kind of a grid of metal wire or whatever. And I don't think that would have gone any way, made any real traction here in terms of being less kind of techie looking until the 3 or 4 or 5 years or however long it would take for it to completely fill in. So what we're really doing is emulating a wood trellis. It's actually in an 1.5 inch by 3 inch proportion. It's going to be tube steel, however, so that it'll last, so that it'll be permanent. It'll be powder coated or Kynar coated in a brown wood color. We would do it in wood if it would be something that would last for a long time, but those, something then that kind of the lighter proportion is just going to go south and everything else. So the idea is it has the proportion and emulates a wood screen, and we're going to be planting it with vines. So then elsewhere on the project where we had corrugated metal, like up on the equipment screen, which you can see in some of these views back here, and on the building itself where we had the corrugated metal, we're replacing that with a horizontal cementitious siding. It's not the bevel type siding where it's overlapped like shingles, but Certainty actually makes a version where it is just like a shiplap with just kind of a reveal where the shiplap is, so it gets kind of a horizontal reveal. So it still gets a fairly strong horizontal.
Like T111, but horizontal.
Well, they're wider. They're about 8-inch boards, but they're individual boards. It's not T111.
No, not at
It's
all.
individual siding boards. Yeah, and so that material would be used for the screen, and also for where we had the horizontal corrugated metal on the building itself. So we can look at those on the elevations, see you all the way around. So here's the horizontal trellis. We're very happy with this. I think it really gives us a much softer edge along Canna Perdido. Without stealing Phil's thunder, we're going to be working with the city to try to get some street trees on Canna Perdido as well. So this would be the same horizontal siding as the equipment screen. Same thing here coming up. We also eliminated a little bit of the board and batten. We had always had it shown as the board and batten within these cowls on the west side. On the Olive Street side, we had this reversed, and we had the board and batten down on the lower portion, and the kind of larger panelized, actually plaster up on this upper floor. Well, we reversed that, so we've got plaster now on the lowest level of this, kind of with the cowl floating above it, with the consistency of the board and batten in between, which we think it just kind of takes a little bit of don't quite have as much of that material on this elevation. It makes it a little bit softer. And this would be a painted plaster, dark, and we're going to be emulating the colors. We brought a color board here. We know we'll be defining those colors before final, but this is kind of the color palette that we're talking about. We're wanting to use this kind of a brick red to emulate a lot of the brick buildings that are in this block, but in a more subtle way. So that would be the accent color, and the other kind of lighter color of painted plaster, the cowl. So it's a very warm palette. We've also incorporated on this one little element here some natural Santa Barbara stone veneer. We actually always had that on the planters back here. And so we decided to pull a little bit of that materiality up to the front. So that piece is where we have a stairway that goes down. It connects the garages, but it'll also probably more than likely have a lift to get from the half level from the upper floor garage up to the podium level inside of that. So there's a nice view of that too. And you really actually get to kind of see that a little bit as you're looking down the sidewalk behind the tree there. As far as the height, we've done some more work on bringing the building down, and we're going to show you a comparative. This is we have some other copies here we can pass around. Let's take these off. This is a comparison section, and what we did is we just took the section looking north and south and put them nose to nose, so you can kind of really read all of the numbers as they go down. So this basically, the red numbers represents the total reduction from the first time you saw it to where we are now. It's gone down another 6 inches. So the plate height up here from the very beginning has gone down
2 feet.
2 feet. Put my glasses on. You can read the numbers as well as I can. The front cowl, which is probably the most obvious, has gone down 3'6". That's this piece, which is what I think I pointed out that's what you really read.
The apparent height of the building.
Apparent height from the sidewalk. And we went down another 6 inches on this floor level since the last time. So it's actually been down. It's down a foot from 2 times ago, and we've lowered this level of the garage 6 inches. That's what I mentioned to you last time. We were able to, by moving around the balcony, we were able to lower that in order to still maintain our 8'2" clearance for the handicap vans on that level. We have to have handicap parking on both levels, so we can't lower that anymore. So that represents the numbers of what we've reduced it.
Okay. Thanks, Mark. Anything else? Oh, yeah.
Phil, talk about the landscape.
Just real quick, Madam Chair. The 2 or 3 movements that we've made on this with respect to landscape is we added another olive tree where the missing tooth was, and then we are proposing to add 7 trees in tree wells. I need to run it through Public Works and the Urban Forest Superintendent as to what tree we can use. Presently, it's designated as a canopy tree. We'd like to use something a little bit lighter, like a palm tree there, so we would have to go get a street tree designation change. And those would be in tree grates that would be 4 by 7, and that would still allow ADA access between the trunk of the tree and the edge of the sidewalk. And then the last movement we made was just the Distinctus, as Mark mentioned, on the trellage that is along Cannon Perdido.
All right. Thanks, Philip. So we have some public speakers. If you're in the audience and you want to speak and you haven't submitted a pink form, please do so. Starting with Don Sharp, followed by Ernest Watson. It's E. Watson. I'm assuming it's Ernest Watson.
Thank you, Don Sharp. I want to thank Chair Sherry for paraphrasing, not reading, but at least paraphrasing my letter 2 weeks ago. Before you give this project approval, I'd like to remind you of your goals and guidelines one more time regarding a 50-foot high, extremely contemporary building, 205 feet from the El Pueblo Viejo boundary. In my opinion, you're ignoring the time-honored desires of the community that you represent. I appreciate Mr. Mosel's comments 2 weeks ago regarding the project needing some semblance of Santa Barbara architecture and his sensitivity to the existing craftsman homes in the neighborhood. This is a valued and charmed neighborhood, and I would like to remind you that the ABR's reputation is really on the line here. Thank you.
Ernest Watson, please.
Followed
by, thank you.
Sorry.
Just keep things moving. Mary Louise Days.
August body of highly educated people. And to say a few things about, do I have to talk into this? Yes. Okay. Say a few things about the project. My residence is at 1001 Olive Street, up the street 1 block. And I come to you to say that this is not at least the drawings I've seen, is not a Santa Barbara style, and it doesn't have the essence of Santa Barbara. And I'm very surprised that that's got this far in your meetings. I spoke at one of the early meetings about this. Thank goodness the stainless steel is gone, apparently. I just returned from New York and saw the Chrysler building, where that seems very appropriate. But it certainly isn't appropriate in Santa Barbara. And I'm quite surprised that you're even thinking of doing that. But I'm not getting into the aesthetics of it at all. I'm getting into a traffic problem that I think needs your attention. And that's Olive Street itself. We have an east-west traffic flow from Milpa Street to the freeway in the west, and vice versa. And it gets bottlenecked right down a very narrow street at Olive Street. 1 block of Olive Street leaves an 11-foot passageway, travelway for cars going in one direction. Now, there's a reason why, at least my understanding, there's a reason why Public Works does not like parkways. They don't like parkways because nobody takes care of them. And if you look down Olive Street, you'll see that they're all just dirt. And I think what you should do is levy a condition on this thing to widen that bottleneck that runs from Carrillo and around the high school to the west, to the east, and so forth. So you have a real funnel of problems there getting traffic around, and we experience about 3 rear view mirrors knocked off of cars every month of cars passing too close. Now this is a project that's going to increase the density in this residential area quite a bit. That means more traffic, more cars. So I ask you all to reconsider some of your improvements made in the past and follow Mr. Mosel's suggestion that maybe you should try something a little more Santa Barbara-y rather than some industrial approach, because we're not an industrial community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Watson. Mary Louise Days, followed by Monique Mansfield.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mary Louise Days. I'd like to reiterate my remarks to you 2 weeks ago about the mandate that's in several city documents for design control, and point out that, of course, as we all know, the Santa Barbara economy is balanced a great deal by visitor income, by the attractiveness of the community, the worldwide reputation, and that reputation is not based on modern architecture. It's based on our heritage and our beautiful setting. The houses, the residences in this neighborhood, for the most part, are part of that heritage. Olive Street has a wonderful mixture of residential styles. I find it difficult to see why the current modern design in that old state building on the corner is being matched or enhanced instead of turning it toward the architectural heritage of downtown and the neighborhood, and we certainly have architects capable of doing that in this firm. I think it's a shame to add more siding that then has to be covered with vines. El Pueblo Viejo is in the same block. You were not given full information 2 weeks ago at your meeting. The easterly boundary of El Pueblo Viejo crosses its boundary streets and follows the property lines. So this property is 205 feet from the easterly boundary of El Pueblo Viejo in this block, because the line is behind the blood bank building. Last meeting, the comment was made that this is an area in transition. We've so far not seen evidence that it is transitioning to larger and larger mixed-use or commercial buildings, especially in the proposed style. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Louise. Monique Mansfield. You're going to have to wait for Monique Mansfield because she's next. And then you can speak again, maybe. If you're nice.
Hello, my name is Monique Mansfield. I'm a little nervous. The last time I spent a significant amount of time in this room, I went into labor.
Yeah, I remember.
Anyway, I'm here to update my previous letter submitted May 29th in support of this project. I live at 1032 Olive Street, and I'll just speak to just the additions. The overall increase in landscaping, including flowering vines along the architectural screening of the building, the opportunity to relocate mature palm trees from the existing project to be planted along Cannon Perdido in the public right-of-way, the addition of an olive tree where one appears to be missing on Olive Street, and a further reduction of apartment heights enhances this very well-designed and well-thought-out project. It is clearly the intention of this property owner to ensure the experience of the neighbors on the public right-of-way is pleasant and in keeping with beautiful Santa Barbara. What I spoke to in my letter 2 weeks ago was that knowing that this project will keep the original vision of the contemporary office building and incorporate a much-needed residential component while using best management practices is the type of project that should be supported in this neighborhood. And I believe just in living in this neighborhood, there was a contemporary residence on the 400 block of Carrillo Street that actually was very handsomely designed. And it seems like this community, especially that block, it lends to this style of architecture. There are many Spanish-style buildings, and it's not in El Pueblo Viejo. And so I strongly support this style of architecture, and the landscaping is phenomenal. It's really a very well landscaped and well thought out project. Plus the opportunity to be a lead project is very well appreciated as a neighbor. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Monique. Okay, Mr. Watson, really quickly.
I left a packet.
You have to come up here.
I left a packet with you. I left a packet with you that shows how Olive Street could be widened, much similar to what's in Samarkand on Stanley Drive, by simply fitting cars in between the trees. It would widen the road to, I think, 32 feet. And this would make Olive Street a more passable area and not this funneled. And remember, too, that nobody's using the parkways along Olive Street. Everybody's planting their front yards, and they look very attractive and so forth. And there's actually olive trees in front yards being planted. So I don't think we're losing anything by taking out a dirt parkway to provide more parking for the people who work downtown. And that's just a general opinion.
All right, thank you for that extra bit of information. Okay, anybody else? Public speakers? Tony, go ahead.
Yes, we got two letters that I would like. They're short enough. I'll just read them.
All right, we're already way behind.
We have a letter in support from Mark Mansfield, 1032 Olive Street. He says he works for the County of Santa Barbara and has for the past 22 years. I live at 1032 Olive Street and have the opportunity to walk to my workplace on East Carrillo Street. I support this project for its ability to provide an opportunity for other members of the workforce to afford to live downtown and enjoy the benefits of this great walkable neighborhood. I support this project and recommend approval. We also have a letter that came by email from Mark Winke. We are in appreciation and support of this proposed project at 901 Olive Street. We own a house in the neighborhood and have lived there since 1998. Together with our dogs, we have spent many an hour walking about and looking at buildings and homes. The neighborhood is a nice collection of various styles of architecture and most notably a few very fine examples of contemporary and mid-century modern. I believe designing within this context is appropriate and more reasonable than other styles for this particular location. We applaud the proposal's use of a mixed-use program as it is an effective bridge between the commercial edge of downtown and the adjacent residential neighborhood. The proposal also works within the confines and contextualism of the immediate neighboring buildings. We think it's appropriate to embrace all the fine styles of architecture in our community and celebrate the unique micro-pockets of beautifully designed buildings and neighborhoods that exist in Santa Barbara. Overall, the proposed building scale and attention to detail are nicely refined.
Thanks, Tony.
That's it.
Okay. Questions from the board? Stephanie?
That is flat perforated metal in panels as you see it down, they're like 42-inch high by about 36-inch wide metal frame, flat perforated metal, not corrugated. We want to be able to use that so we can control the size of the holes. We want to try to make it look a certain amount of transparency, but not be able to see all the stuff that people are going to ultimately put on their deck. So it would be something with a more, smaller holes,
More
space
solid
apart,
than transparent.
which we would bring an exact. We have to pay to get a sample made of that, so we would bring that for when we get around to final, hopefully. But the idea is to keep it semi-transparent.
Is that shown on the color?
Yeah,
Is there a
it's
color
all-
change or
It's painted the brown, to be the same brown as all these.
matching?
Yeah, it's matching. It shows in the elevations. You can see it here.
300s. Black and white. Okay, so it's a contrast.
Yeah. Yep, it's there, and it's on all those balconies.
That medium brown there.
Yep.
It's supposed to be either the brown color or the terracotta color, depending on what we can get it in.
Any more questions? Nope. Keith, questions?
There was
elevation.
Yeah, it appeared there was like a low. What's this kind of horizontal element
That's
here?
That's the same material as this, and that is ventilation into the garage.
Okay, so that's the facade of the
That used to
garage.
be perforated, corrugated, but now it's in the same kind of slat.
Okay. And the proposed color of the plaster on all of them,
It's that medium, yeah.
the medium color.
Yeah.
Okay, no more questions.
Matches the color of the building body that we'd be doing the building body. Excuse me, this is a darker one, but that was the intent that this color was that the intent that this color matches the building body?
It's kind of hard to tell with the shading of the trees, I think.
Paul?
Can you just keep on the sheet? Can you refresh my memory? This right now is a slumpstone brick wall, and you're covering it with plaster?
Right.
And what was the reason for covering it with plaster?
We just wanted to get it a little less textured.
Okay.
We thought it was a little bit too coarse for the look of the building, the model, the undulation. So
The slumpstoneness?
Slumpstone.
Question having to do with the palm trees. The palm trees that are here shown that you're proposing, are they from the site, or they can be from somewhere else?
They could very well be from the site if we get approval for a palm tree. And it may not necessarily be that palm tree because that's a pretty tall palm tree.
So do you have extra palm trees that you're looking for a home for? Is that
Yes, we do.
Because you are proposing to have some along the back side. So you didn't relocate any, you're not having any less anywhere else on the property.
Well, we moved some
There's-
into here.
Correct?
All of these that are located here would go in through here and back in through here. They would be moved from this location back to there.
Okay.
And then some extras could go along Canon Perdido.
And you said then Canopio, the designated street tree is a canopy tree. Was there any more specifics besides just...
I'm sorry, I didn't get into the specific. It's this tree here. It's the Melaleuca linearifolia. And as you can see, it is quite a big tree, big canopy tree.
8-foot sidewalk is what we have there.
Yeah, and so...
Does that not fit in an 8-foot wide sidewalk or the tree well?
It gets pretty tight in there.
So what kind of canopy tree would the city rather see in that zone?
I would have to confer with the urban forest superintendent and the street tree advisory committee. Oftentimes, the street tree advisory committee will designate or change designation or have dual designation.
Okay. And then last question, I was going to look at the site photographs. The roof cantilevers or overhangs here at this point?
Yeah.
And that's what those lattice work was going to be attached to. Did it have vertical columns that went all the way down? And so that stays in place, and then the screen goes on those two levels. When it turns this direction, were there columns that came down?
We're doing little
L-shape.
upside down L-shaped brackets so we can carry that. The roof overhang does go along here, the same roof overhang that's here, but there's just no brackets, and so we're just hanging down those brackets and making them L-shaped so that we can continue that sun shading along the west.
And the purpose really for having two layers is just for the thermal protection of the solar sunshade.
Primarily, yeah. You can see it here. Here's where they...
Exactly.
Right.
But the roof overhang exists currently.
Yes.
The vertical columns on this side exist, and you're adding the brackets here.
Yeah. Right now, these are very small columns as well, little tiny tube steel columns, and we're proposing to encase those into a board form concrete, into a blade, like a plane, so that it gives a little bit more mass to sit on, and those are the same that happen in the new piece as well.
Okay. Thank you. Those are my questions.
All right, thanks, Paul. Gary? Chris?
Just a few. So the impetus for the new street trees along Carrillo was from the loss elsewhere on site, or was there a request for additional street trees?
The impetus for the street trees on Camp Perdido is to add another layer of screening, the most effective way to add dimension to a building. Because we did feel that facade of the building, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was pretty flat and very one-dimensional. So by adding another layer further away, we felt that helped enhance it.
Cool.
In addition to the vines, right?
Correct. In addition to the vines. Vines were the first step, the first movement, and then I suggested the street trees. And that kind of street tree configuration exists other places in town where it sort of pinches down. You're well aware of, Mission Street underpass, the Starbucks on Carrillo.
Right. Okay. And have you done anything in regards to the SWMP requirement yet?
No. What we're thinking of doing, I believe, is putting it underneath
Cistern.
the driveway here.
Okay, some kind of cistern of some sort.
Uh-huh.
And we would handle some of it in these planters back here,
Yeah,
too.
we could handle some of it back in here too.
Okay. And then have you considered a material for the interior courtyard ground plane yet, or is it a little further down the line?
Well, we've had pretty good luck with a concrete topping slab over a double waterproof membrane and so forth.
Right.
So that's what we'd be proposing, something like that.
Maybe a polished concrete or something with
Yeah.
some grit.
Yeah.
If I have some grit.
That's all I have for questions.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Comments? Who wants to start?
I don't mind jumping in. First of all, I like the architecture, and the architecture in this area is, I say, mildly contemporary. There's a lot of variety that's happening here, so this isn't going to stick out like a sore thumb. What Santa Barbara's heritage is in highly detailed buildings, and buildings that have great articulation. Because we can drop an I Love You Spanish building in here, but if it was done cheesily, it just doesn't work. And what works here is the fact that there is so much interest happening in all these different planes and these facets. The trick for you, which you're working on, is putting in building materials that blend in with our community. And when you have these high glossy, stainless steel kind of materials, that's what gives you the knee-jerk reaction that it doesn't belong in our town. And when you start getting into, say, more natural building materials, natural colors, more earth tones, and that kind of stuff, the building is going to be interesting. It's great. I never mentioned this before, but I'll mention this. It's only my personal preference, is that there's no really need to get rid of the slump stone, even though it did have that undulation that you were getting rid of. And if we're adding a whole wall over here of Santa Barbara sandstone veneer that has undulation, it seems kind of weird that we're getting rid of it over there. So there's a possibility of saving some of the original masonry look there. The horizontal slats is working. I like the translucentness that it has here and the way that it's tying in. And I'm looking at the existing photographs and looking at the elevations, and it's coming together. Personally, I don't accept the idea of the palm trees. That's just not working for me. A canopy tree would be perfect, because that's the best solar coverage that you can have on those windows. And you would get a nice tree-lined canopy on the sidewalk, and I think that would add some great dimension. The palm trees, that doesn't, somehow that seems odd just to have it in just this one section. Other than that, the building is moving in a positive direction from the perspective of how I see it and how I think it belongs and it will fit into the community.
Thanks, Paul. Gary?
I like the direction that you're going. I think the materials are coming together a little bit more with the Santa Barbara flair. But I would like to see it go a little closer with some native materials. I like the idea that we're using some vertical siding, and I do like the horizontal siding that we're using. I'm not really opposed to the tube steel screens. I think that's a great solution for it. I do love the idea of having the trumpet vines over it. I think the elevation that is working is the one that you added, the Santa Barbara sandstone, and we have our address there as an entrance. And I think that's kind of the direction that we should be heading is to be adding some of that native material and keeping it a transitional building where we can see that there's a little bit of Santa Barbara in it, but we can also see that there's the future in it and that there's the modern style. Something that Paul mentioned about the building being, the existing portion of the modern building being stuccoed or leaving it as sumpstone, I actually think that strong corner right there would do really good by veneering that in sandstone and giving that corner a strong Santa Barbara look. And I think that's would go a long way towards having some materiality that is really towards the public and looking like, hey, we are fixing up the front of this building and we are taking care of the front of the building and we are looking at Santa Barbara. I do see neighbors both sides saying that this does not fit in the neighborhood, and I do see neighbors in the same thing, they're saying it does. Not my particular favorite style, but I have to say that I think it does fit in the neighborhood. And I just want to see just a little bit more Santa Barbara. And I actually think that opposing Paul's view here, I think the move of the palm trees in front of it does give it some of that verticality and does give it a little bit of flair towards the Santa Barbara with the Washingtonians in front of it. So I kind of do like the idea and would support my move towards changing to those trees to the tree committee, the street tree committee. So those are my comments, and I think it is getting close and ready, and I do appreciate bringing down the height another foot.
Thanks, Gary. Chris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have too much else to add. I think the palms are fine. If you put a canopy tree in there, I think it's just going to be too crowded and it's too close to the facade of that building. So I think the palms are a good move. I would be curious to see what the rest of the street trees are there, if they're all the other that you had mentioned, or if it's sort of starting to move in the direction of a palm.
Do you want an answer?
Sure.
They're Podocarpus gracilio.
Okay. So, okay, that's fine. And then I would just reiterate a comment from a while back about eliminating agaves from areas adjacent to the sidewalk. If I saw a note there. Yeah, and then over here we still had some agaves left over. So,
okay.
Yeah, just
yeah, okay.
But that's all. I think there's a lot of a substantial amount of landscape on this project. I think that'll really help to soften things up.
Thanks, Chris. Keith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I'll pretty much echo the comments of my fellow board members. I especially appreciate the continual reduction in the height. That's kind of been my concern all along, particularly with respect to the Olive Street neighbors. So I think you've done a good job there of bringing that down. I think I tend to see the material palette kind of along the lines of Paul's and Gary's comments, that particularly on the Olive Street side, I think if there was an introduction of a little more of the sandstone, Paul mentioned the existing masonry wall there. I don't know if there's any opportunities along Olive, maybe like the spandrel condition below this window or something, particularly that's at kind of pedestrian level. So I think more introduction of that. I think we're all happy to see the perforated metal go away on the sunscreens. I'd encourage you to rethink, maybe given that, the use of the perforated on the balconies, particularly again on the Olive Street side. And since you've introduced this horizontal material, maybe there's a finer scale horizontal wood that adds a little more kind of natural material again on that residential side. And then last thing on materials, kind of moving in that direction, I don't know if the color palette on this side can transition more to a little lighter colors, again, kind of maybe relating to more traditional stucco, and maybe less articulation in the plaster on this facade. I know you're kind of cueing off the patterns on this building, but maybe it dials down a little more there. So I think, again, just kind of transitioning the materials and palette on the Olive Street side. And then I think, yeah, the landscape's really looking great. I don't know if there's any opportunities to introduce any of this green screen concept on some of this Olive Street facade here. Again, kind of right at that pedestrian level where these panels are, that might be kind of a nice color and texture touch there. I kind of like the palm trees. I think the verticality is a nice foil to the horizontal of the buildings, and it does kind of ground it back into our region. So I think I support that move. So yeah, I look forward to the continuing development of the materials palette and the colors, but I think it's ready for project approval, so you can do that.
Thanks, Keith. Stephanie?
I appreciate the changes that were made from the last video and the natural materials that we're seeing. And it's, I would agree with Keith on using some sort of similar horizontal banding and a natural material on the balcony railings would be a nicer material to see and more natural looking. I really like the green screen, and I'm wondering if I realize your need for air circulation in the garage, but bringing in some of that vine on this back west elevation. I really like it on this building. I think it's going to be great on that Cannon Bernardino Street side. And I'm really pleased with the Olive Street elevation as well. The height on this back part bothers me, and bringing in that green screen, I feel like, would soften that. That's it.
We're going to change guards. We're going to change guard, but before we leave, do you want to say one comment? Meaning that you have no comments? Unless you have a quick second.
Yeah.
Is that vodka in that bottle?
No, I was leaving because I have to leave right now, but I didn't have any additional comments.
And I wanted that
agree
for the
with-
record.
Okay, that's good.
Thank you very much. So with that, we've had our comments. Do you want to add anything, or should we just go to a motion?
Can we get preliminary design approval?
Yeah.
Well, let's see if there's support at the board. Any board members want to float a motion?
I can just say that all the comments that were made are totally acceptable to us, and we could certainly, as moving into final, I mean, I'd particularly like to get approval today so that we don't have to keep coming back for these minor types of things, but we're totally on board with everything that was mentioned, bringing in a little bit more stone, different horizontal railings, fine. You know, we're not
Basically, the mass bulk and scale.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're fine with those comments.
So let's bring it back to the board. See if there's anything else that we can add.
I'll just add a motion, so this would be for project design approval, continued back to full board with the following comments. Board appreciates the continual reduction of the mass, bulk, and scale in the height, particularly along Olive Street, and the elimination of the corrugated metal. The applicant's is to study alternatives for the perforated metal used at the balcony railings. Look for additional opportunities to utilize the green screen on other elevations besides Cannon Bernardino Street. Look for opportunities to introduce additional locations of the sandstone material, in particular on the existing masonry portion of the building along Cannon Perdido. Applicants encouraged to restudy the color palette, particularly the Olive Street side, to lighten the materials to relate more to some traditional materials in the area. Overall, most of the board members are supportive of the use of palm trees as street trees along the south elevation.
Perfect, thank you. Second by Gary. Is there any discussion by board members?
Mr. Chair, oops, could you please touch on the compatibility analysis criteria in the motion?
Okay.
The board feels that the project is compatible with the criteria. My eyes are failing me here. Let's see.
Item 3, do you see that there?
It's appropriate in size, mass, bulk, and scale. Is compatible with the desirable architectural qualities of the city. It's consistent with the design guidelines. Does not have any impact on adjacent landmarks or historic resources. Does not have impacts on public views of oceans or mountains, and has an appropriate amount of landscaping.
And protecting the ficus tree?
In particular, in preserving the existing ficus tree.
Okay. Any other discussions, comments? I have one other to add. The motion says to study the colors. And in discussion, I'm thinking that this elevation is very muddy because you show the olive trees in a shaded pattern, so we really don't see the colors. And this building next door is the red brick building, which is very red. And so your transition perhaps is fine, because I look at this color and I look at the color board in relationship to the red brick, and I see it working, but then this is also very muddy. So when you study this elevation to change the colors to blend in with the neighborhood, especially across the street, I mean, also consider this, which I wanted to mention that for everyone's benefit.
Mr. Chair, I don't want to split hairs, but I would prefer if you didn't call that trellis a green screen in your motion, if you would just call it a trellage or a trellis.
That's fine.
Okay, just because green screen's a trade name and I don't want to get
I understand.
Yeah.
Any other discussions from board members? If not, I'll call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously with Dawn stepping aside, or stepping out early.
Thank you very much.
All right. And I will announce that there's a 10-day appeal period for this project. And we're on to the last item of the night, which is 900 Calle de los Amigos.
Thank you for your time.
All right. Only the ones that are appropriate to the project do we need to note.
I did. It didn't have a negative impact.
It's all right. So if I have your name for the record and your presentation.
My name is Justin Van Mullum. I'm with On Design Architects. We were here last May 14th. There are a few comments. And basically what I have in front of you is kind of the history of this building. It's the administration building. Does everyone remember approximately where it is? It's a big parking lot in front of it. It's about 100 feet off of the curb. And this was the original elevation that was approved with the design approval. And then this is what we showed last go around, which there was concerns with this area here. and also the well, and then no fenestration in this area here, and also the shaping of this elevator tower, and then the elevator tower on this side, and also, let's see, yeah, the fenestration here, and then also the shape of this window being out of scale with the rest of the facade. So those were the basic issues and then there were some details as well.
Well, let's see what you have proposed.
Okay.
What you are proposing. Actually, keep that one handy in case we want to make reference up. Sorry about that. So this is not as important.
Yes. Well, this is what we're proposing today. So if we have scaled this back.
Let's just go and do this.
So we've scaled this back more into proportions as requested, and kind of studied the detailing, brought back the flared columns, and kind of beefed things up to give it a more residential feel. And then we studied the equipment well, and one of the recommendations was to try to make it feel like it was a balcony and hide it that way. So that's what we've done, is we've created a balcony detail up here. And let's see, on this, I think that's all for this elevation. Okay. And then moving down the line, we studied, this was a gable before, and now it's a hip, and we have a nice little detail going around it. We have put in these new windows here in the bathrooms. We put in new windows here on this, there's a bed and breakfast above, basically a little hotel room, extended stay. And then there's the new elevator tower. Here is, that was that unusual window that was very large, and we've brought it down to scale. And we've also brought this all the way over to kind of help create, this is on the south side, and so it will help with the heat. And let's see, we've added more of a vertical feel with the vent, which was one of the requests. See, one of the things that was requested is that we kind of study working on this building here. I went back and we talked to the corporation, and really this building is a whole nother phase, and they want to stucco the whole building, and they want to treat it appropriately, and they just don't have the funding right now. This is very carefully thought out, what we were going to do and what we weren't going to do. And this was never, adding any type of detailing to this was never part of the program. So it is on their schedule to, and they're slowly building up their funds to do a whole remodel on this building, but it's not in the plan right now.
Okay.
And then the other request was to study there was a light, and it's an ADA light. I've looked for more arts and crafts style lights that meet ADA, and everyone I think is actually going to meet it. It's just slightly extends out too much. So we could have them custom made, or we could go with something like this. And I'm still looking, because I'm not thrilled with this light, but I needed to bring something to you to get approved. And everything, there was one that was perfect, and it says it's ADA, and if you look at it, it's slightly over 4 inches. So this spec meets the 4-inch requirement. And then our colors, just real soft. We've got the trim color, and then this is the stucco body color, and this is our accent color. The accent color will happen along this belly band here, also on the columns, column bases. The cap is a sandstone, and we looked at doing different type of stone throughout the whole column and flaring it a little bit more. That was one of the recommendations, but some of the concerns was that if there was too much stone there that was too jagged on these corners, that it would be a potential problem as far as nicking it, and there's a big issue with bleeding when you nick your skin in the retirement community. So that was a concern that I hadn't thought of, that was brought up when we went and were working on these columns. And this is going to be a well-traveled colonnade for the residents. So and then the other accent color would be right in the gable here and also in this gable as well. So those are our colors. That's the existing roof color that we'll be blending into. And see if there was any other issues. I did look at the overhang, because I think we had 3 inches before in between with this column cap, and we brought it back to just 1.5 inches. And so that was one of the details that we studied. I think I hit everything.
On item 2 on that list, the span support and the supporting beams at the bus stop is too large.
And originally we had
where was that?
We had, I think it was like 28 feet, and now we're down to, it's less than what was approved before, so we shrunk it down even more. And one of the reasons we were trying to make both sides of this accessible, a path of travel with seating, and so we just kind of scaled things back and made it work and still accessible. We just don't have seating on both sides.
Thank you. So with that, I will open up public comment. Is there anyone wishing to speak? Seeing nobody. Tony, are there? I see a lot of people. Sorry. No letters? Then I'll close public comment, return to the board for questions of the applicant. No one's jumping in. So then.
Quick clarification, Justin. The gables are the shingle.
They were shingle, but they weren't originally, and so we went back to what was originally approved.
Actually, I see a number 8 right here, and it says Hardy Shaker, exposed staggered edge notch panel. What do you want?
We want stucco, and that's what the direction was from Valverde.
Well, what looks better?
Well, the hard part was when you have the shingles. We thought shingles would be nice, but when we looked at it with the rest of the buildings in such proximity to the existing building, it didn't feel right. The two materials were hard, so that's why we went back to the stucco.
So, jumping out, what's the need of having this horizontal band? You wouldn't? It would just
color change. So we have this. This will be the trim color. This is our accent color, which is that darker color. So we still have an opportunity to kind of break things up with the color as opposed to the material.
Okay, but it's plaster above.
I'm sorry? Yes, but this would not be in the same plane. It's a wood band. Well, it'd be hardy board, but.
Okay. Questions for the applicant? Comments? Does someone want to jump in? And are we here for final, or is this just an in progress, just to show?
Final.
This is for final. And it's final for just this structure?
Just this structure. And this was, again, what was approved preliminary.
Right.
Look at detail.
Yeah. Is this the only set we have? This was continuous.
Yeah, they're exactly the same.
I'll still go through it. Elevations.
And then this is our elevations with our details keyed in.
Okay. So we'll look for this detail A 1.9 when we get there. Let's see. Okay.
What
The transition, you had plaster, you had the hardy board and plaster.
Mr. Chair, were there some, as I recall, there were some detail comments last time. Do we have those on the minutes?
These are the second page.
The detail.
Nope, it just said restart. Nope, no detail comments.
It was just that one detail that was the right here, and this was 3 inches before, and we brought it back to 1.5, and then.
is your expansion joint?
That's right at the plane where we have our belly band, and so
Okay.
our expansion joint is there, and then that's where we paint in different colors.
So that bottom portion, the base is not out proud of it.
It is
It's
not.
in plain. Okay.
Okay. I guess I have a generic question. Are there other places on campus where they have shingles up here in the gable end? This was
No.
the only place?
Yeah. None of our new residential buildings have any shingle. It's all stucco. Whole campus is stucco, including the existing buildings, including all the eaves. We've chosen not to do our eaves in stucco.
It's not that condition.
What?
You're looking at 19? 18?
Where the beam,
That does happen on the
tube
colonnade.
steel?
Right
Where's
here.
the tube steel? That's tube steel?
This is tube steel going to tube steel. Right in this area here.
Okay, so that's
It's an 8 by 8. In perspective, you can see that it looks good from the street. You-
Okay. Any other questions or comments from the board? And if not, we can make a motion to move forward.
Those little sconces here, those.
No, it's they're drawn to scale.
I guess I just have one comment, and that would be that I don't really think this sconce fits in to the overall architectural, the rest of the detailing that you're showing here. Yeah, so maybe we can come back on consent for that, possibly.
base detail and the or expansion joint detail that you show. I think that there should be an actual change in plane. I know you're considering that the tenants of the residents of the place, but even an inch and a half coming out, 2 inches, whatever, that there should be a base that comes out proud of the wall rather than just be flush and plain with that change of color.
Is
At
that
the
this
expansion
condition,
joint.
detail
Yeah,
5?
Detail 5.
Where does it happen in elevation?
Just right here, right
Is it-
yeah, right along the walkway.
And it's a change of color?
Yeah, it's a change.
Does anyone else want to chime in? I mean, I agree with Stephanie for picking that up. I wouldn't have caught that. But we typically see something sticking out 1.5 inches. Either way.
I feel like it can come back on consent. It's
Yeah.
a consent item.
Could we, if it's just that, then that.
Yeah, we can
I
just
can
make that a
detail,
condition.
yeah.
We can make that a condition of approval.
That and the light too. We can have a more custom.
The light I'm not as concerned with because it's mildly institutional, and if that's what the code requires, just like those silly bumps on the,
It doesn't bother me because of the tube steel detail of the columns is kind of a modern detail, and that's in keeping with that.
Yeah, for myself, I'm not too concerned with the sconce just because of the coloring, and it is what it is. One minor thing is I noticed there wasn't any breakups in this area, but maybe that was intentional. And then there are breakups in these windows, and you go to the 1/4 inch scale, and they didn't follow through, which to me, again, it's minor.
Would you be okay before this is hodgepodge? I think the direction of the board was to have the breakups on the top floor.
Yeah, but on that one, it has it on the top and the bottom.
And I'd like to go to. I'm okay either way. It doesn't really matter to me. It just needs to be.
Does the board have a concern about should it be on the top and the bottom, both conditions, or if they was just to have?
You can see I was drawing them in here because the double windows didn't have them. It was just a.
Yeah, I actually think it looks more appropriate to have them the same on the top and the bottom. It follows the family. So with that, is the board comfortable with the following comments? Or go into consent?
Motion for final approval with the following comments. Applicants encouraged to continue looking for alternative sconce fixtures for the lighting, and revise the plaster wainscot detail to bring the lower portion proud of the upper portion.
That's detail 5 on sheet A 9.1. Is there someone who would like to second that motion?
A second.
Second. Any other comments? If not, and then final approval. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Oops.
I don't think I saw this last time. Someone abstained.
One abstention. With that, thank you very much, and I'll announce a 10-day appeal period. And I will close the meeting for June 11th. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.